Edit audio.
This podcast discusses murder and violence against children. Please take care while listening. In the last episode of the Feeney family murders, we talked about what happened in the Feeney's quiet community after the triple homicide. Jon was living back at the family home and driving his wife's car around town. Prior to all of this, he was a man who was considered a respected member of the Springfield public school system, and his students loved him.
He came across as friendly, kind of casual, that he wanted to be on friendly terms with the students.
But information that was discovered in the trial would paint a vastly different portrait of Jon Feeney.
I was struck during the trial that one of the, female teachers that he had sex with had said that she felt that he had mind control over her. And I just thought, how does that happen?
On Monday, April 22nd, 1996, over a year after the triple homicide, Jon Feeney is indicted on 3 counts of first-degree murder for the deaths of his wife and 2 children. 6 months later, he would be a free man, and the case would come to a standstill.
A few years ago, I kept reading people saying, well, it's a cold case or unsolved. Well, no, it's not. To me, it's like the O.J. Simpson case. I don't think there's a doubt in anybody's mind that O.J. Simpson killed Nicole and Mr. Goldman. A jury found him not guilty. A jury did not say he was innocent.
On this episode, we'll head to the courtroom and start to unravel part 1 of Jon Feeney's trial.
And I thought, well, I've never seen anything like this.
And it showed them having sex on the tape.
Yes.
And whose tape was it? How did you see it?
It was one of the teachers who had recorded it, and I'm a reporter.
Did this come out in court?
It did not.
Why is that?
There were lots of things that did not come out in court, like prosecutors put on several women. They did not put on all of the women.
This is the Feeney Family Murders, an Ozarks true crime story, and I'm your host, Ann Roderick Jones. In 1996, when the trial was happening, it was broadcast on Court TV, a national network known for its coverage of high-profile crimes. Anyone in the surrounding area of Springfield could tune in and watch as this trial was happening in real time. Our team has been working tirelessly to try and track down those tapes for months, but have come up empty-handed. In fact, there's very little about this case online, aside from old newspaper archives.
They had the trial at, I think, the ceremonial courtroom at the Judicial Courts facility, just the biggest courtroom because they knew there would be a lot of railbirds wanting to watch this. Jury sitting on the right, all of us in the cheap seats, and it was electric because Court TV was there, Beth Karras from Court TV, so everybody wanted to meet Beth Karras from Court TV. Everybody was really, like in the entire court's building, activity stopped. You had other lawyers and other judges who were just like, I think I'm taking a recess and I got to watch these opening statements. I got to catch some of this testimony. And so throughout the week, you would just see most of the defense bar and many prosecutors and judges just watching this trial because they were watching really good lawyers practicing at a high level of their craft. And there was lots of yelling. I always love when lawyers yell at each other because then, it feels like a drama. And I don't know how much of that was because of the cameras.
Ron Davis, a journalist who covered this case as it unfolded, has been generous enough to mail me physical newsletter articles that date back to the mid-90s. I can find a lot of these online, but it just feels different to hold them in my hands and to see those images. There are full pages with liquidation sales and Mother's Day raffles, an NBA playoff in sports where Michael Jordan scores 28 points to beat New York. There are articles about President Bill Clinton. In an article from May 8th of 1996, there's an image of officials removing a body from the Feeney home at the time of the murders. The caption beneath it reads that Highway Patrol Lieutenant Jack Merritt thought that this scene was staged by Jon Feeney. So I want to point out that a lot of this information is coming from the prosecution, many of whom agreed to be interviewed. And I think it's worth noting that we tried multiple times to get Sean Askinosi, Jon's lawyer, to speak with us. He knew that we wanted to talk to him, and he's chosen not to answer. Let's go back to the beginning of the trial. Shortly after Jon Feeney was indicted by a grand jury, his lawyer made a smart move.
After he was indicted by the grand jury, Sean Askinosie immediately filed a motion for a speedy trial. And that tripped up the prosecution because they thought, we'll indict him, we'll have years. We'll spend years and somebody will roll. And instead, you've got Askinosie going, let's go to trial now. And he did it. And then he told them, by the way, let's have it right here in Greene County. Let's have a Greene County jury do it. And the prosecution didn't know what to do there. And they kept saying, hey, there's no way it's ever going to be held here. There's no way. And turns out there was.
Ron Davis told me why this was significant.
Sean Askinosie knew that he could draw a jury pool out of Greene County that would at least question whether his guy was guilty because of the motions that he had filed leading up to the grand jury indictment, questioning whether the police knew what they were doing. He was able to get the jury pool to a place where they knew plenty about the case, but they also knew that it wasn't a slam dunk. And I think Sean viewed it as, if I go to Boone County, if I get a jury out of Columbia, they're not going to know any of that. And they're just going to go, husband charged with murdering his wife and kids. Yeah, he probably did it. In terms of a tactical move, it's brilliant.
So now a prosecution that had been expected to have years to indict Jon Feeney was scrambling to gather a case against him. So what evidence did they really have? Forensic evidence was definitely out of the question. A DNA test was performed on the items found in the Feeney home, including a sample of semen on the bed. Margaret Pratt, a former Missouri Highway Patrol Crime Lab serologist, said that the semen found on the comforter of Feeney's bed matched that of the defendant. There was an argument that Cheryl washed the sheets every Saturday and was killed on Sunday morning. But again, that was weak. Additionally, the prosecution did not test Tyler's headboard or Jennifer's crib for fingerprints.
That's also the problem with the forensic evidence. Jon Feeney's DNA was in that house. Duh. Of course he left physical evidence there. If they would have had an eyewitness.
If you remember, Jon Feeney said that he was alone in his hotel room from around 10:30 to 11 p.m. at night until 6:59 a.m. the next morning. So it seems that Jon was the only person who could account for his whereabouts on that night. That is, until the prosecution found an eyewitness. Here's Daryl Moore, the chief assistant prosecuting attorney at the time.
And then we had a gentleman that was working at a gas station on Sunshine near the house that testified and gave statements that Feeney had been in the gas station.
They had found someone who claimed to have seen Jon that night when he was supposed to be alone in his hotel room. His name is Ron Gann, and he's a gas station attendant. Here's Rita Sanders.
There was a witness that said that they saw Jon in Springfield pull into a gas station and was in his Mustang, and it was that day. And that was the huge witness that they were going to have to show he was back in town.
The prosecutor's case was built entirely on him leaving the lake, driving back, killing his family, and then going back to the Lake of the Ozarks.
Along with the gas station attendant, the prosecution also began searching for character witnesses, and this is where Jon's personal life really came into question. On September 30th, 1996, the public learned about the affairs. Jon Feeney had at least 4 affairs with women in the years leading up to the murders.
And then there were the rumors and allegations of infidelity, which, as more and more information came out, it was one woman and then a couple of different science teachers, and then it was 4.
There was Michelle Norgren, an educational consultant who testified that she had a 4 or 5 month affair with Jon Feeney in 1991. She said that she and Feeney met weekly at volleyball games. Michelle waited until 2 weeks before the trial to tell her husband about the affair. The second woman, said to be an unmarried middle school teacher in Springfield, testified that she slept with Jon one time about 4 years prior to the trial. She testified that Feeney suggested the affair. She also said that Jon engaged in conversation about his son Tyler and that his wife was pregnant with Jennifer. She said, "To me, he seemed to be excited." And there was Pam Probert. At least I think that's how you pronounce her last name. Pam was a science teacher from Mansfield, Missouri, and was with Jon Feeney at the teachers' conference. Remember that they had gone to dinner together, and he was stopped for a speeding ticket on the way home. Pam testified that she and Jon had had intimate relations but not sexual intercourse. This happened on 3 occasions: February, April, and November of 1994. Each time, it was at a teachers' conference. Pam testified that Jon Feeney spoke about his family. She said that she once asked him if he was unhappy and if he would ever divorce Cheryl, and he said no. But there was one comment that really stuck out to me. On trial, Pam was asked if Feeney ever said anything that gave her pause. After a long silence, she said, "There was something he should have known about Cheryl before they got married that I guess put a strain on their relationship." She testified she didn't know what that something was.
And when the women came to testify, the women that Jon Feeney had slept with, there was not a seat in that courtroom. And there were people standing because they all just wanted to watch these women having to say, "I slept with that guy, yeah. And yeah, I told my husband this morning."
Today, Pam Probert is a college chemistry teacher. I've tried calling and emailing these women multiple times without a response. I know that this must have been such a painful experience to speak to a reporter about this, and then to be put on the stand, on live TV to tell your story, a story that people were anxious to hear for entertainment value. I think that would have been pretty devastating. None of these women testified that Jon was abusive towards them, nor that they witnessed him being abusive towards other people. However, another woman, Kimberly Ray, had a different experience. Kimberly was a teacher at Pipkin Middle School who testified that she had sex with Jon Feeney many times in 1990 and 1991. She broke off the relationship and said that she felt she needed to totally get away from any influence he had on her. Ray explained that Feeney used a form of mind control to lure her to bed and told her to use an eraser memory when she was feeling guilty about their affair. Ray also said that she had sex with Jon Feeney and 2 other men on a boat at Lake of the Ozarks. She too was married and stated that she had told her husband about the affair 8 days before the trial. Tell me about this video at the lake.
It's Jon Feeney and a couple of other male science teachers, and they're with a woman science teacher. It was summer break. I mean, that's when they have time. And it was a sex fit. And at the end of it, she turns to the camera and says, "I bet you boys are glad there aren't 2 of me." And I thought, wow, I've never seen anything like this.
And it showed them having sex on the tape.
Yes.
And whose tape was it? How did you see it?
It was one of the teachers who had recorded it, and I'm a reporter.
Did this come out in court?
It did not.
Why is that?
There were lots of things that did not come out in court, like prosecutors put on several women. They did not put on all of the women. And there was a certain evidence that I think you would then have to call people up to the stand to verify the veracity of the tape, chain of custody. And I think they had problems with some of those witnesses to get them to come to court. It was tough enough with the women because court TV was covering it.
"135 pieces of evidence were presented in the courtroom. Prosecutors showed a 5 by 10 foot piece of wall that had been cut out. It had the words "die" and "bit" painted on it. There were more than 90 photographs of the crime scene and items retrieved from Jon's car, including that McDonald's receipt from Lake of the Ozarks. They had 150 endorsed witnesses that could be chosen to take the stand. All this to argue that Jon Feeney left his conference in the middle of the night, murdered his wife and 2 children, staged the crime scene, and then quietly slipped back into the resort. Mark Webb has been working in law enforcement since the 1970s. He was called to testify about the staged crime scene and the door that was supposedly kicked in. If you remember, Rita mentioned in a past episode that strike plate, the metal plate on the inside of the door near the doorknob, looked like it had been unscrewed. You're going to hear a lot about this door, but it's important. This was a key piece of information used to convey that the scene was staged. So how many doors do you think you've kicked in?
Whew. I didn't do them all myself. I'm just saying with the team and the group, we did well over over 200.
And what would the strike plate and the screws look like most of the time?
Sometimes it wouldn't pull out, so it would stick on the door. Sometimes it would shatter the whole jamb, the whole wood. It would separate and break. Or the door, sometimes on some of the houses, they were not very strong, and some of them were pretty flimsy doors. Some of the doors would fall off the hinges, and everyone was different. But, it's rare if you're putting any force, or if you're, and again, we worked a lot of burglaries too, where they've pried their way in. And usually if there's some type of pry to push the door, there's marks on that jamb where you've pried against it to push the door back. So
what would it indicate to you to have the strike plate and the 2 screws laying down below the door?
That's just pretty unusual that it would be that close to where the door was forced open.
It's strongly believed by many that the door at the Feeney home was made to look like someone had kicked it in. Rita described the scene to me by saying the door was on the hinges, but it appeared to be kicked in except for the lock, which was broken and busted open.
I mean, any time a door is kicked in and screws are stripped, there's pulp on those screws every single time. And there wasn't any. He didn't want to kick in the door. He didn't want to have to fix it. So he just unscrewed it and made it look like it was kicked in.
Prosecuting attorney Daryl Moore laid out some of the evidence that was presented at the trial.
It's obvious the strike plate has been unscrewed. It has not been kicked off the door. The door was not forced open. Then you have the writing on the wall trying to make it look like, whether it's a bunch of kids gone wild or people in the woods, whatever, die a bitch. But we had a handwriting analyst look at it. And as I recall, he testified at trial even that the handwriting on the wall was consistent with Jon Feeney. And then the fact that all the victims are face down. Behavioralists are telling us someone who knew them, family member, friend, especially with the kids, did not want to see their faces. But when you started looking at it, it narrowed down, and the only logical, reasonable suspect was him. He could not account for that time frame. And it was plenty of time frame to drive to Springfield, kill them, stage the crime scene, and get back to Osage Beach by 7 o'clock in the morning.
When our team was visiting Springfield for interviews, we decided that we'd make this drive to see how long it took us to get there. And granted, we didn't do this in the middle of the night, but instead during the day when there was a steady stream of cars but not a lot of traffic. Our time clocked in at approximately 1.5 hours. That means that the round-trip journey from Springfield to Tantera would take about 3 hours total. So is that enough time? We know that phone records show Jon spoke to Cheryl at around 9:15 p.m. and that he paid a speeding ticket at approximately 10:30 p.m., all in Lake of the Ozarks. And the next timestamp is a receipt from McDonald's at Lake of the Ozarks at 6:59 a.m. This leaves about 8.5 hours unaccounted for. The thing is, apparently the mileage on Jon's car didn't account for this extra drive.
When they seized Jon Feeney's Mustang at the Lake of the Ozarks, they checked its mileage. Jon Feeney is a sort of anal guy who keeps a trip log. I changed my oil, here's my mileage. That's kind of boring, I have to say, but he had done that before he went to Lake of the Ozarks. The mileage checked out.
Of course, it's not impossible to forge a mileage log, or to use another car for that matter. But what was the motive?
Well, there was multiple things. One, he was a philanderer. He was having relationships with other teachers, other people. We had students at Glendale, female students who told us about improper comments and actions by him. So our theory was that he wasn't happy in his marriage anymore and wanted to be free from it.
There was another red flag that the prosecution raised in their arguments.
There was also a life insurance policy on her, payable to him. It was a significant figure. I want to say $500,000 life insurance policy. And so the basic theory being he's out being Romeo, not faithful in his marriage, neglecting his family, tired of the marriage. There's a $500,000 life insurance policy.
Prosecutors said that Jon Feeney killed his family in part to collect the life insurance money. Had he been planning this for a long time, or was this just a coincidence? My aunt was a teacher in Springfield at the same time as Jon Feeney. She remembers that there was an insurance deal going on at that time for teachers.
And there was a year, I think it was just a year, where the insurance company opened up so you could take out more insurance if you wanted to.
So maybe Jon just bought the insurance policy because it was a good deal for teachers at the time. The prosecution had a motive and some circumstantial evidence. They had the staged crime scene and their star witness who saw Jon Feeney the night of the murder. Their case was looking good. But then the defense found something that called this all into question.
Now later, given diligent efforts by the defense team, the timesheets didn't show that guy working. So we had, talk about an unpleasant surprise.
The defense found that the prosecution's main witness, the gas station attendant, wasn't actually on the timesheet for the evening that he claimed to have seen Jon Feeney.
But by the time we tried to get the records from whoever owned the station, we discovered they destroyed their timesheets in 3 months. So we couldn't verify one way or another.
And those hairs they found at the crime scene on Cheryl's nightgown, they didn't belong to Jon. So whose hair could this be? Were there any other suspects? In the next episode, the case starts to fall apart, and we find out what was left out of the trial.
Did she talk to you about Jon and wanting to leave him, or?
Well, she did. We did discuss it, yeah. I did know there were problems, yes.
Feeney Family Murders is part of the Edit Audio original series Ozark's True Crime. It is written and hosted by me, Ann Roderick Jones. This episode was produced by Ali Sirwa and Kathleen Speckert and was edited, mixed, and mastered by Ali Sirwa. Our executive producer is Steph Colburn. Thank you immensely to the entire Edit Audio team and Patrick Rendell for the theme music. To those who generously shared their time and information with me, thank you. If you want to get in touch with us, you can email us at hello@editaud.io. That's HELLO@EDITAUD.io.